Thank you, Brother Bob. Good evening, everyone. It really is an honor for me to be here with you this evening. It brings back a lot of memories. I'm sitting at the table here with the Cappadutaran chapter from the University of Georgia. I pledged the new pledge class at Cappadutaran 36 years ago this month. I joined the Air Force. In the time that I've been in the Air Force, I've traveled to all 50 states. I've traveled to more than 4 dozen different countries overseas. In some ways, I've traveled far from the fraternity. But in the ways that count for the important things, Cappadutaran and the fraternity of Phi Gamma Delta have never left me, and I've never really left the fraternity. It's things as easy as in the spring of 1979, I was assigned at Kunsan Air Base in Korea. It's a base on the southwestern coast of Korea on the Yellow Sea. One evening I went into the officers club and there was a rowdy bunch of Marines there. And the gang leader of these rowdy Marines was Lieutenant Bud Duncan. He was one of my fraternity brothers. And I wasn't surprised to see Bud in the middle of that. As time went on, it was a delight for me to get the fraternity's magazine, the Phi Gamma Delta. I could keep up with what was going on in the fraternity. I tended to look at every single page. I didn't read everything, but I read a lot of it. And I took a lot of pride in what people in the fraternity were doing, whatever they may be doing, wherever they may be. In recent years, of course, we've had the online edition, and we've got all kind of information online. I look at the Georgia chapter, the Cappadutaran chapter. I look at what other people in the fraternity are doing as I look online. But the fraternity is not just about memories or things that happened in the past. It's mainly, of course, about people. My best friend today is one of the guys I roomed with as a sophomore at the Cappadutaran chapter house. And that's Tom Watson. I had breakfast with him in Washington, D.C. just a couple of weeks ago. I saw him in Atlanta a few months before that. And I'm also real close to one of my little brothers in the fraternity, Bill Bass. And that's really what the fraternity is all about. Those people, the people you're with, and the other people in the fraternity. Back in October, I had occasion to go back to the University of Georgia. We were having Air Force Week in Atlanta, and as a part of that, I went back to the University of Georgia School of Law to give some presentations. I've got a fairly busy travel schedule, so for this particular travel, I didn't have time to stay overnight or even go by the fraternity house. We drove by it, and I saw it, and I took pride in that. But it was just a quick trip from Washington, D.C. We flew in commercially and flew back military air. But as we were driving in close to the University of Georgia, I began to feel at home, especially as I got to some of the neighborhoods in suburbia just outside of Athens. And I came to some houses that were not only homes, but they were also businesses. And I remember some of that from Georgia life. And there was one house in particular that stood out because it was a business as well as a home. Outside was a sign that said, Dr. Jeremiah Upton, veterinarian and taxidermist. And underneath that, he had his slogan, either way, you get your dog back. How many of you have been to the Pentagon? A lot of you. Pentagon's an interesting place. They're in the midst of a renovation right now. The renovation's going a lot slower and costing a lot more than the original building took. But the Air Force is known for technology, and my executive officer was telling me, you need to stop by, when he knew I was going to visit the Chief of Staff's office. He said, you need to stop by this certain room where the Air Force has turned it into all of the newest technological gadgets. You know, not just copiers and scanners and digital senders, but some things are just amazing, the way they'll sort and make copies and collate, and you can send emails and turn them into all sort of stuff. So I had a few minutes on the way to visit the Chief of Staff, so I stopped off in this office, and it really was pretty cool. And I was looking at all the machines, and some of them I understood, and I was over one machine, and just kind of looking at it, I had no clue what it was. And a young officer came up, and he saw me, and he figured the old guy needed some help, so he said, can I help you with that? And I said, well, I'm really not sure how to do anything on this machine. He said, I'll help you with that, sir. He took the papers that were in my hand, stuck them in the machine, and it was incredible. The machine hardly made a sound, and you've seen shredders. This didn't shred it. It didn't make confetti. It turned it into dust. And so the young officer said, "General, can I do anything else for you?" And I said, "Well, thanks. I need 10 copies of that." I heard a story a couple of months ago that I decided would really be appropriate for what you're going to be going through at the academy here. It has to do with a shepherd who had a huge flock. He was out in the middle of nowhere. He never saw other people. He just tended his flock, and he was by himself. One day, he sees a cloud of dust approaching. Man slams on the brakes to his brand new BMW, rolls down the window, leans over through his sunglasses. He says to the shepherd, "If I tell you exactly how many sheep you have, will you give me one of them?" And the shepherd said, "Well, sure." So the young man gets out of the car, gets his BlackBerry, punches up something, finds a NASA satellite tracking overhead. He pulls out a laptop computer, plugs in some formulas, checks out some other things through his BlackBerry, plugs in his satellite cell phone, puts in a complicated formula, plugs in a micro printer, spits out about 30 pages, and finally he looks at the shepherd and he said, "You have exactly 2,643 sheep." And the shepherd said, "Well, you're right. Help yourself to one of them." And the shepherd watched as the young man bundled up one of his animals and put it in the back of his car, and the shepherd said, "Wait a minute, if I tell you what you do, will you give me back my animal?" Young man says, "Sure." The shepherd said, "You're a consultant." And the young man said, "I am, but how did you guess?" The shepherd said, "It wasn't a guess. You just showed up here. Nobody asked you to come. You wanted me to pay you for information I already knew in answer to a question that no one asked. Now, and you really know absolutely nothing about my job. Now, give me back my dog." I mention that story because here at the Academy, you're not going to be talking with consultants. You're going to be talking to leaders, people who've been there, people who understand what's involved. We've got a lot of graduate brothers here because they care about you. They want to help you because it's important for them that you develop your leadership skills the right way, and it's going to be important for you to develop the next generation of leaders. The most important thing a leader can do is to find successors and train them to be an effective leader. George Washington, in the winter of 1776, wrote a letter to a Philadelphia attorney, Joseph Reed, who had been one of his aides. Reed was a close aide. Washington missed him. He needed him. In the letter to Reed had gone back to Philadelphia to be with his wife and children in his practice of law. But Washington said, "I need you here." He said, and the quote is fascinating. What he said is, "I need people that can think for me and not just execute orders." That's what leadership is all about. Your leaders, and all of you know as the chapter leaders, you've got a lot on your plate. You need people not just to give you problems, but to give you the solutions. You need to help train those people so they can think for you, not just execute orders. You could think for yourself, and you do it, and you can take pride in that, but you don't have the time to do it enough. So you need to rely on other people to think for you. There's a great story from the Spanish-American War in 1898. President McKinley needed to get a message to a rebel leader that they believed was in Cuba, but he wouldn't respond to telegrams. They weren't even sure where he was. They couldn't mail the parcel to him. They couldn't figure out how to get the message to Garcia, was the rebel leader. So finally, one of the president's aides said, "President McKinley, there's a young West Point graduate named Rowan. Lieutenant Rowan can get the message to Garcia." So they bundled up the president's message to the rebel leader. They gave it to Garcia, and they gave it to Lieutenant Rowan, and the instructions were, "Take this package to Garcia." Lieutenant Rowan got on a boat. 4 days later, he disembarked in Cuba. He went over rivers and into valleys and over mountains and across rivers. 2 weeks later, he came out on the other side. Mission accomplished. He gave the package to Garcia. As a leader, think about what that means. You've got someone who is creative enough, dedicated enough, professional enough, that you give them some basic orders. Take this package to Garcia, and they accomplish the mission. That's what we need to do. That's the type of leadership we need. You know, in the fraternity, one of the best things we say is, I am mighty proud to be a Fiji. It's not a boast, it's a statement. When you say it, I want you to mean it. Mighty proud to be a Fiji. We're not talking about pride in the bad way, as a conceit. When we talk about pride, we talk about the quiet satisfaction you have from a genuine accomplishment. There was a man named Sam Malouf, whose parents had immigrated from Lebanon, settled in California in the 1930s. When World War II came along, Malouf volunteered, joined the Army. Fought in World War II, came back home, got married, bought his first house. The house had more rooms than he had furniture. So Malouf bought some simple tools and started building furniture. He became so proficient at building furniture that decades later, samples of his furniture work are in museums all over the world, including the Smithsonian Institute. Sam Malouf still works at his woodworking shop every day. He's in his 90s now. And he had a great quote I heard about a year ago. What Mr. Malouf said is, I don't let anything leave my shop that I'm not proud of. What a great standard to have. You need to take pride in it. Mighty proud to be a Fiji is not just words. I've got one word that is my real message this evening, and that is the word pride. I'll break the word pride into its component letters, make an acronym out of it, and tell you what's important about that for leadership. The letter P stands for professionalism. You're professionals. People are watching you. General Douglas MacArthur said, you are always on parade. You are. As a leader of your fraternity, people are looking to you to see how you do things. People on campus look at you when you wear your Fiji jacket or jersey. They form some opinions on the entire fraternity based on how you come across. Leadership is an analog talent in a digital world. What that means is you're not going to be a great leader if you send great emails or text messages. You've got to get out and see people face to face and do it the old-fashioned way, meeting with people, making things happen. Professionalism is critical. A part of professionalism is what Fiji does best, and that's being a part of a team. You're part of a great team. You take pride in what each other does. There will be occasions when you do something that people congratulate you for, and you'll know that you really didn't do it yourself, but it was the invisible team of fellow fraternity brothers who helped prepare you for that moment. Maybe they did some things in particular to prepare you, or maybe they did some things just in general that helped make you more effective, but you're going to have that team behind you. You're not a lone wolf. You're not by yourself. You're part of that team. There's a story from March of 1990. Michael Jordan had his highest scoring game. He scored 69 points in a game. There was a rookie named Stacey King who scored 1 point in that game. After the game, a reporter came up to Stacey King and said, "What are you going to remember about this night?" And King said, "Hey, this was a great night. I'm going to remember it as the night that Michael and I combined for 70 points. General George Marshall had the observation that there's no limit to what a person can accomplish if you don't care who gets credit for it. Think about that. Don't do something to get the glory. Do something to make the positive things happen. The letter R in the word pride stands for respect. Respect goes both up and down. When you were a pledge, it was easy to be respectful to the brothers. As a brother and as an officer in the fraternity, you need to show respect to pledges, but also to your family, to other people on campus, to your instructors, to people who are loners even. You need to show respect to them. It's critical. Robert Fulham wrote a book 15 or so years ago, and the title of it says a lot. Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And he's got little stories in there like, put away your toys after you're finished playing with them, don't start fights, take time to have cookies and milk in the afternoon. There are some basic lessons you learned as you were growing up. Remember those now. Things like saying please and thank you. And as a leader, I guarantee you, You'll get a lot of mileage when you say, I'm sorry. There are some people who have too much pride in the bad way to admit that they've made a mistake. No one is perfect. Sometimes you'll do things that may be really bad. Hopefully you didn't intend to do something really bad. But if you were responsible for it, tell people you're sorry. You'll get a lot more credit for that. People will appreciate it a lot more, and they'll respect you a lot more for it. The letter I in the word pride stands for integrity. Integrity is critical to everything we do. Your word has to be your bond. You know, how great is it to be a Fiji? When you meet a fellow Fiji, if they tell you something, you believe it. You're assuming that a fellow fraternity brother has integrity. I like Chinese food. And I even like the fortune cookies. I look forward to the fortune cookies. You know, sometimes you get one that says something like, Confucius say, men who run behind car get exhausted. I even like to eat the cookie. One day I was at a Chinese restaurant. The food was good. Got my fortune cookie. I was all excited when I broke it open. And the fortune said, there are no degrees of honesty. And I was thinking, boy, what a ripoff. Confucius didn't say that. And then I started thinking about it. And I realized maybe it just didn't translate right, but it really is a wise thing to say. There are no degrees of honesty. If you say he's honest most of the time, that's not a compliment. If you say she has a fair amount of integrity, that is not a compliment. Integrity is an all or nothing thing. With your brothers, we assume you have it, so don't do anything to cause us to doubt that you deserve it. Charles Barkley was a basketball player, now he's a basketball commentator, and he says, you know, I'm not a role model. Well, unfortunately, athletes are role models. You don't get to choose whether you're a role model or not. You're a role model. People look to you to evaluate how they should conduct themselves. You're going to be a role model. The choice you have is whether you're going to be a positive role model or a negative role model. There's a lot of things I do now that I think about, I'm doing it the opposite way I saw someone else do them. So that was one of my negative role models. You don't want to be someone's negative lesson learned, someone's negative role model. When we talk about integrity, I'm reminded of the story of Senator John McCain, who was a prisoner of war in North Vietnam for 5 years. He and his fellow prisoners were tortured terribly sometimes. And sometimes the captors, as they were torturing them, would tell the American prisoner of war, if you'll speak against your country, then we'll stop the punishment. No one's going to know. It's just between us. Tell us something negative about the United States. And the prisoners consistently would say the same basic thing. It came down to 3 words. I will know. Think about that with whatever you do. There's a lot of things that you may do that you think nobody's going to see this. I'm taking a shortcut, or I'm being dishonest about something, but no one's going to catch me, no one's going to know. Well, you have to look in the mirror. You have to go to sleep at night. You have to live with yourself. Remember those 3 words. I will know. The letter D in the word pride stands for determination. Leadership is an art and a science. There are no real born leaders. There are people who develop the skill better than others. But an effective leader is someone who keeps at it. There's the old saying that it's not the size of the dog in the fight that matters, it's the size of the fight in the dog. When I joined the fraternity, I did a lot of reading. They made the pledges do it, whether we wanted to or not. But one of the things I read, I remember Brother Calvin Coolidge, who was President of the United States in the 1920s. He was a fraternity brother, and one of his great quotes had to do with determination. Press on. There is nothing that is more important than perseverance. Talent is not. There are an unlimited number of talented people who are not successful. Genius is not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education is not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. Keep at something. Keep trying your best. You're not going to succeed at the tough things easily unless you're very lucky. You won't always succeed no matter how hard you try at some things, but try hard to accomplish the goals. That's critical. Doing the right things for the right reasons. Teddy Roosevelt has a great quote about the people who criticize. He says, "It's not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena." There are going to be plenty of people who are looking in from the outside who will criticize you because you weren't successful, because you tried and you blundered or you failed or some bad things happened to you. But it's not the critic who counts. The credit goes to the man who is actually in the arena. When you've got a job to do, focus on that. I heard the clerk of the United States Supreme Court talk to a group of Air Force judge advocates a couple of months ago, and he said the important thing is solve the log that's in front of you. Focus on that. Compartmentalize your mind. Do what you're supposed to be doing now. That's important. The E in the word pride stands for enthusiasm. One of my fraternity brothers was named David Little. He went by Chicken Little. And Chicken was the happiest guy in the world. You couldn't be in a bad mood when you were around him. He would say, just, it'd be quiet, nothing would be going on, and he would say, "What a great day to be alive." And it was weird, but you couldn't be in a bad mood when you were around Chicken. General Colin Powell has observed that a positive attitude is a force multiplier. You're a leader. Your attitude and approach is going to be infectious, either for the good or for the bad. If you're in a good mood, then other people are going to be in a happy mood too. If you're in a bad mood and people are trying to joke with you and you're just in a horrible mood because something with your girlfriend or something with one of your school subjects has gone bad, then other people won't feel good if they're in a good mood around you. So your attitude is going to be contagious. If you've got a personal problem, compartmentalize that. It's not other people's problem. A positive attitude is a real force multiplier. Another part of living is to have balance in your life. Don't just focus on schoolwork, for example. Schoolwork's important. Some of you who want to get into the professional areas know you need to make certain grades, or you won't be competitive for the best schools, or you may not get in at all. School is important, but college is about more than just studying all the time. Have balance in your life. If you're spiritual, do that. Family, do that. Obviously, you've got the fraternity, and the fraternity is a great break from other things. It'll teach you a lot of skills that are not for college days alone, but you've got to have balance in your life. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking with my wife over breakfast, and I was telling her about, she said, "You're traveling a lot next month," and I told her all the trips I had all over the United States and a couple of overseas trips that month. And she said, "Sometimes I think you love the Air Force more than you love me." And I just kind of looked at her, and she said that was not a rhetorical comment. And so I thought about it, and I said, "I love you more than I love the Army or the Navy." But you need to have balance in your life. When you're an old man and you're looking back over your life, you're not going to miss the fact that you didn't study one Saturday night. You may regret the fact that you didn't do some things with your fraternity brothers or with your family. So think about what really is important in life. So the word pride, which I'm telling you is critical, can be broken down into professionalism, respect, integrity, determination, and enthusiasm. When you say, "I'm mighty proud to be a Fiji," I want you to mean it. Those aren't just words. Mean it. I'm mighty proud to be a Fiji. Again, it's an honor for me to be here with you this evening. I salute you for all you're doing. I'd love to trade places with any of you. You've got some great opportunities ahead of you. I'll be glad to take questions from anyone. Thank you. the JAG Corps has a coin, and we've got 5 of them with us. My executive officer, Lieutenant Colonel Dapper, will give a coin to the first 5 people who ask questions. So, who's got the first question?
Don't be bashful.
I'm Brock Robertson from Texas A&M. I'm wondering what you learned at Georgia over here. I'm wondering what you learned at Georgia with your fraternity that helped you get to where you are today as the head judge advocate general.
What I learned is the value of having balance in my life, the importance of friendship, the importance of learning how to do what really is important. My fraternity, the Kappa Deuteron chapter that I was a part of, had people who worked hard and played hard. We had great grade point averages. We won athletic championships. We had people who got a lot of individual honors, but there was real balance. We threw great parties too. We had a good time. We did a lot of childish things with each other. We really did have a great time. We've got great memories, but you learn about having balance in your life, which is what I just emphasized. What I also learned is the importance of integrity. And my brothers, there were a few who we learned didn't have integrity, but they really were the few, and they were ostracized, and we tried to bring them along, but integrity really is critical. You have to be a man of your word. But having the balance in life, being able to do a lot of things, and being able to be organized where you could get a lot of things accomplished are the type of things I learned in the fraternity.
I'm Adam Forrest from University of Minnesota. And I was just curious what skills you learned as a fraternity gentleman that you thought set you apart from other members of the military.
From other attorneys or from other people in the military?
Other members of the military.
Law school teaches you a different way of thinking. You have a totally different way of looking at issues and problems. You learn to analyze things differently. When I started law school, I used to read real quickly. I could read a novel in a day. I remember being in the law school library one day, and I was reading a case, my first year of law school, and I realized it had taken me over an hour to read 6 pages. So I'm not a speed reader anymore, but you think about things differently. You've got to be able to answer the professor's questions, and the point with most professors is you're not going to answer all the questions right. So what tends to happen when I went to law school was the professor would call on you, you'd stand up, you couldn't look at your notes anymore, and he would ask you about the case you had read. And it was this Socratic method of teaching where you would learn things as you were talking about things that you weren't even sure you knew yourself, but you learned to think on your feet, you develop skills. In my case, I did a lot of litigation early, so I learned how to think on my feet and how to respond to things and not be intimidated no matter what. I remember when I was a lieutenant colonel, I was working on the Joint Chief of Staffs for General Colin Powell and later General Shalikashvili as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. General Powell was a great guy, and he would do the right things for the right reasons. He's a guy you can completely respect. And I remember one day, he was talking to me about an issue. It was only the 2 of us in his office. And he was asking me some questions, basically being a devil's advocate, because he was asking questions as though he wanted to do the opposite of what I believed was the right thing to do and what he would do. And I was using skills that I had developed when I was in my first year in the Air Force as a defense counsel, and I was cross-examining people. You know, there's a way you learn to do it effectively, and it's all about communication. Lawyers are not going to be successful unless they're good communicators. A lot of people in the Air Force, even who become fairly senior, are not especially good communicators, but the lawyers who are successful are good communicators. So those are all the skills that are critical to being successful, and it helps distinguish attorneys from some of the pilots or other people in the Air Force.
My name's Adrian Carver from the University of New Mexico, and I was wondering what your favorite specific memory or story was from when you were in the fraternity.
In Athens, Georgia, there's a tree that owns itself, It's an interesting story about an old guy who loved his tree and didn't have any family, so he left the tree to itself. And he left a lot of money to the tree. And the tree died years later, but they planted an acorn from the tree. And that son of tree that owns itself. And the last time I saw it was a big, beautiful oak tree, and there was a little monument in front of it that described the tree that owns itself. One day we had a run-in with some fraternity brothers from a different fraternity who were nearby, and so we turned that into the tree that owned the delts. We got their stone and put it in front, and it took a lot of teamwork and effort by my brothers and myself to move their stone, and it took them about 2 weeks to find where their stone was, and I heard they had to get a crane to move it back. So that's one memory that comes back, but there are a lot. You'll find the things you do will come back to you at various times. Sometimes you wake up in a cold sweat remembering things you did. But it really was a good time. The camaraderie, the teamwork, and learning a lot about yourself. It was a good time, and you keep those ties. It really is not for college days alone.
I'm Bryant Ingram from Tulane University. In your remarks, you commented about the importance for leaders to create new leaders and put people in a position where they can think for you. I'm wondering what advice you would have for when you're in a situation where you have brothers who desire to be put in a position that you don't think they're the right person for, and to try to, I guess, sway them into doing taking on a job that they might not be as interested in, but you think that they'd be better at.
Yeah, and see, that's where it's easier for me as the Judge Advocate General. I can just order people to do things. But, really, I was talking to an employer a couple of months ago about a retired judge advocate, and he thought that we go around ordering people all the time. In my 31 years almost in the United States Air Force, I have never ordered someone to do things. As you become more senior, they do it because they don't want to displease you, but I really don't order people to do things. You're a fraternity leader. You do have a certain amount of authority and power, but you should exercise it wisely, and you're not going to have it if people don't respect you. So if you find someone who wants to do something that they're really not suited for, there are a lot of approaches. The best one tends to be a private counseling and consultation. You don't want to embarrass someone in public, but if you talk to someone and say, look, I like you, you're my brother, you've got a lot of really good traits, you've got a lot of things that are going to make you very successful in life, but right now you're trying to do whatever it is, and you really aren't best suited for that, and here's why. I'm giving you some honest feedback. You need to hear this. What I found when in the Air Force, JAGs are the ones who tell commanders what they need to hear, which is not necessarily what they want to hear. And most often we'll be in a staff meeting and the commanders will say things that we know aren't exactly right. Most often what we'll say is, when it comes around to the JAG, boss, I'd like to talk to you in private after this. Sometimes we are obliged to say it in front of the whole group because we don't want the rest of the group to be going down the wrong path. And when I've talked to commanders, whether I was a brand new Air Force Judge Advocate as a captain or in my current position as a two-star general, when I talk to commanders, a lot of times I'm telling them things they don't want to hear. Sometimes later they will tell me they really appreciated that. Frequently I'll find that they did really appreciate my advice, and sometimes they'll see what bad things would have happened if they hadn't gotten my advice and followed it. Sometimes they don't appreciate my advice because it didn't tell them what they wanted to hear. But the point there is, you're doing it because it's the right thing. Even if you counsel a brother and it offends him because you're telling him he's not best suited for something, you're doing the right thing and you can live with yourself. That's what's really important. See, we ran out of coins.
Vladimir Petunin, Colorado School of Mines. Have you ever dealt with, and if so, how did you deal with, team members or partners who may have the wrong kind of pride, and there's no way to remove them from the position, but everything they do is detrimental to your final cause?
Yeah, everyone has that situation. And, it depends on where you are in life. What I found in my fraternity was we would tend to give someone a hard time and would ridicule him for having so much pride. And we'd do it in a way that he might have thought we were joking, and we'd make it clear we weren't joking. Somebody really was too cocky. And we might do it as a group gaggle, telling him how bad he is at certain things and how he is too prideful, and it's all about him. It's all about his ego. I emphasize the teamship part of things. And that's what's really important. We're part of a team. We take pride in what the team does. If somebody gets too big for themselves and they think it's all about them, then we need to talk with them. Sometimes you do it with a group, sometimes you do it individually. Sometimes you'll be successful, sometimes not. But you're dealing with people, especially while you're in the fraternity and you're talking about your brothers, you're dealing with people who are young and still at a formative stage. And even if somebody seems real cocky and boastful and it's all about them, they're at a stage of life where they still can learn the right lessons and apply them. And you're really going to help someone for later in life if you point out how, people don't like being around you when you do that sort of thing. You're a great guy. You were pledged for the fraternity. You were admitted as a brother. You've got a lot of really good qualities, but this is not a good quality, and people don't like it. And so at some points, sometimes you can joke about it, sometimes you have a very serious discussion. As a leader in your chapter, you need to have those discussions with people. The goal is to make them better. When these people walk around campus with their Fiji jackets on, are you proud of them? You need to tell them that they're not reflecting well on everyone else. So it's not easy, and you're not going to always be successful. And that's what I talked about with determination and perseverance. And you're going to be criticized, but you're the one in the arena. Try to get it right. It's worth the effort.
Evening, General. My name is Adzio Chersky. I'm from Chapman University, and we're actually a colony, and as such, we don't have a lot of experience. We're going into our 4th semester of operation, and I was just wondering if you've ever faced, either in your professional or your personal life, a situation that you just didn't know how to handle, and if so, how did you rectify it?
Yeah, we do it all the time. First of all, congratulations on colonizing, and good luck to you. I was talking with Brother Bracewell a couple of hours ago about the University of Georgia's history at the Kappa chapter history at the University of Georgia. We first had a chapter there shortly after the fraternity was created in the 1850s. When the Civil War broke out, the chapter disappeared. After the Civil War, it came back, and then it disappeared again. No one knows the story of what happened to lose the chapter, but it went away. So the chapter at the University of Georgia came back 40 years ago. I joined the chapter 2 years after they had gotten their status back as the Kappa Deuteron chapter in the fraternity and not just a colony. So I've talked to people who lived through that process too. One analogy I'll give you is to members of the JAG Corps who deploy. Right now we've got about 150 members of the Air Force JAG Corps. Most of them are judge advocates, others are paralegals. About 150 of them are in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other deployed locations. They left behind their spouses, their children, their parents, people who love them, people who care about them, people who are concerned about them. And when they deploy, they're never sure that they're up to the challenges. They aren't sure that they're going to be ready to do what we need them to do in the deployed environment. What you do, depending on the job, some of the things we have them do in Iraq or Afghanistan are a lot different than what they do at their home station. Part of my job is to make sure they are prepared, they're properly trained, we choose the right people to deploy. They have additional training to prepare them specifically for where they're going. But no one who deploys is confident that they're going to do it right. When they get over there, they find out in almost 100% of the cases that they have been properly trained. They do have the right skill set, the right background and experience and capabilities. And they do the work. In the deployed environment, we tend to work 14 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. You might as well do it. You're over there, and there's not a lot to do depending on where you are. So people work hard, but they take a lot of pride in what they do. They love getting care packages from home. They love getting emails, and the telephone service tends to be pretty good. You can even occasionally have VTCs with folks. But when they go over there, they're not sure that they can do it. So my message to you is do the best you can to be prepared. Take the lessons you're going to learn here at the Leadership Academy, and you're going to make acquaintances with people. I'll tell you that anyone you meet here will be honored if you, as a member of a colony, gives them a call and says, we're having this particular issue, what advice would you give me? Your brothers in the fraternity would be very honored to give you advice. So you shouldn't be confident that you're going to do something right. You can take pride in something when you have done it as well as you can, and then you move on to the next challenge. Take the right sort of pride in genuine accomplishments. But you need to be prepared. You need to know how to reach out for help.
Good evening, General. I'm Rich Gonzalez. I'm from Jacksonville University. I'm also Lieutenant Commander in the U.S. Coast Guard, and I do love the Coast Guard more than the Army Navy also. And also my wife. I have a two-pronged question, General. One is, I have seen many younger enlisted men and some officers getting in trouble recently with the military, some of them Army and Marine Corps. Do you believe this problem with junior forces is a lack of direction, or is it lack of individual values on it that brings these people to violate orders or to do some things that gets them in trouble? And the second one, if I were a young Fiji getting ready to graduate from college, would you recommend that I pursue a career in the military or not?
Okay, good. For the first question, I'm here in St. Louis to be with you, but also at work that I owe to visit. A part of the duties of the Judge Advocate General, and it's written into law, is we have to make visits in the field. We have to visit the legal offices all around the world. We talk to commanders. We talk to the legal office. Some of it's done with statistics, but we get people telling us what they're doing. The fact is, and I'll tell you for the Air Force in particular, but it's basically true in the other services too, our disciplinary rates this year for courts-martial, for example, are about 45% lower than they were 2 years ago. Our other disciplinary indicators are dramatically lower than they were 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year. In the other services, it's true too. The fact is, if someone in the military gets in trouble, it's going to be a good story. You know, the media is going to love it because either someone's going to be falsely accused and you've got that angle, or it's going to be an enlisted person or an officer who's done things to disgrace the uniform. And so that's a great story. So if you're a lazy journalist, find someone who's being court-martialed, and whether he's guilty or not, you've got a great story. But in fact, our force is more disciplined than it had been in the past, so we really don't have a problem. When we have individual breakdowns in discipline, that's the key. They are individuals who break down in discipline. Overall, the American people are proud of the military. You know, I can tell you, when I was in ROTC at the University of Georgia, beginning in the fall of 1970, there were times we weren't wearing the uniforms, even at the University of Georgia. And when I first was assigned in Washington, D.C., we didn't wear uniforms downtown. And when I was at JC, at the Joint Chief of Staff Legal Office, and Colin Powell, a week before he retired, had to testify in federal claims court. And I went down to prepare him for it. I was in uniform, and I was kind of invisible. Especially since 9/11, if I go somewhere in uniform, I'll have people pat me on the back and say thank you, and they do all sort of things to show that they appreciate what people in uniform are doing. I don't take it personally, of course, because I don't even know the people. But they just want to say they appreciate what people in uniform are doing. People would not respect people in uniform, people in the military, if we didn't have a disciplined force. In 1757, when he was a lieutenant colonel in the Virginia militia, George Washington made the observation that discipline is the soul of an army. And it really is. If we didn't have disciplined troops, we wouldn't respect them. So on the first point, we do have disciplined troops. When we have breakdowns in discipline, it's individuals who didn't live up to our standards in the military. On the second point about making the military a career, I would encourage you to look into it seriously. You can get a lot of rewards from serving in the military from any branch of the service. I do love the Air Force, but I didn't come in with the idea of making it a career. I was telling some of the guys at my table that I was in ROTC. I had a commitment. When I first started at Georgia, there was a draft going on. I had a low draft number. I could have been drafted. I had an opportunity to get an ROTC scholarship. I decided to take it. That gave me a 4-year commitment. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, so I got an educational delay after I was commissioned, and I went to law school. I went to summer school twice. I took the bar exam early. I started in the Air Force almost a year before I would have if I had graduated when my class graduated and taken the bar exam after graduating. The reason I did all that and got a jump on my Air Force career was I intended to serve only my 4-year commitment. I had no desire to serve past 4 years. What I found is, well, part of it was my first assignment was in upstate New York, and my friends in Georgia said, when you get back to the States, give us a call. So I was in upstate New York. After a year and a half there, I went to Korea. I mainly prosecuted cases in Korea. I'd mainly defended cases in northern New York. Then I went to Greece. In Athens, Greece, I mainly did international law. I was in the Greek court frequently. From there, I went to the Philippines, and I defended cases in the Western Pacific, Korea, Japan, Guam, and the Philippines for a couple of years. All of a sudden, I'd been in more than 4 years. I enjoyed the challenges, and I looked at them as opportunities. There's a lot in the military that's like what I had in the fraternity, people who live by certain core values. In the Air Force, the basic core values are integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. For the JAG Corps, the people who got the coins see our guiding principles on the backside of the coin, which are wisdom, valor, and justice. And wisdom, you know, when you think of lawyers, you think, well, these are bright people. That's not what we mean by wisdom. We mean people who have experience and can apply their knowledge so they come up with the best decisions for a particular circumstance. Valor, when you think of valor, you think about the martial valor, the martial value of valor, which is being brave in the face of physical danger or enemy fire. And there's certainly that side of things. But a part of valor that affects members of the JAG Corps all the time is having the courage of your conviction. As I said earlier, telling the commanders what they need to hear and not necessarily what they want to hear. And justice is what we do. Justice is not a sporting event. You don't keep score. I'm not impressed if someone tells me I've never had an acquittal. I'm a prosecutor and I've had nothing but convictions. I am impressed if they tell me they did every case the right way. And I'm impressed if somebody tells me that they were prosecuting this guy, but they discovered some evidence that they knew would cause the case to be busted on appeal, or they gave the defense some information that led to a finding of not guilty. That's what justice is all about, doing the right thing for the right reasons. So I would encourage you to talk to people who've been in the military and find out what it's all about. I'm amazed at people who come in saying, I'm in for a career, because I don't see how you can say that. Your family and friends will respect you if you sign up for the basic tour as an officer in the United States military. Serve that first tour. If you enjoy it, stay longer. You're never committed to stay for a career until all of a sudden you look around and you've served a career. You know, for me, 31 years in the Air Force is going remarkably fast. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And when I talk to my friends in civilian life, some of whom have made a huge amount of money, and we compare experiences, they tend to be more jealous of what I've had the opportunities to do than vice versa. Okay, thank you. Appreciate the time.